Hey, everybody, and welcome to Learning from Smart People. It is Rob Oliver here with you as your host, as always, and I appreciate you being with us today. My smart person today is Matt Franklin. He is a serial entrepreneur from Portland, Oregon. He runs a small video production company. He invented a product that landed him on Shark Tank, and he's the host of the Rogue Retirement Lounge podcast, a retirement planning show specifically for entrepreneurs and self-employed people. Hey, Matt, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Rob. Glad to be here. Honored to be here.
Oh, absolutely. So here's my question. You're from Portland, Oregon. So how are you feeling about your Blazers? Like things didn't go as well as planned.
It's an annual disappointment. Every year we get our hopes up a little bit towards the end because they seem to be kind of strong finishers at the end of the season. And then they flame out in the playoffs. And this year was the perfect example.
It's one of those things that, let me just tell you, I'm in Pittsburgh. Okay, so we have the Steelers and we have the Penguins, but we also have the Pirates. Okay, and the
Oh yeah.
Pirates set the record for futility in North American sports. I got married and I moved here in '94, and I was maybe a year or two into it, and the Pirates at that point went on and for losing consecutive losing seasons. Okay, and the folks here kept track of the losing seasons by like where it would be in school. So at some point, like the losing streak went from elementary school to middle school, and then it was old enough to get its driver's license. Then it was old enough to vote, and eventually the losing streak was old enough to drink, which tells you it went on far, far too long. So just being teased by at least getting into the playoffs is something that it's a good thing. You could be a Pirates fan, and things could not go so well.
Well, I can't complain. When you look at it that way, I can't complain. And I had no idea the Pirates had a streak like that because I still remember Willie Stargell
Yes.
and Kent Tekulve. I mean, you'll never forget that sidearm from when I was a kid. And so I still think of the Pirates as a contender because clearly I'm not paying attention to baseball, but I'm sorry to hear that.
It's quite okay, but let's. I appreciate the reminiscence, and listen. There's a joke in Pittsburgh that's like, how many Pittsburghers does it take to change a light bulb? And it's five, and it's one person to change the light bulb, and four to talk about how much better the Steelers could have done it in the '70s. So, but
Oh, that's good. I
yeah.
like that.
All right, so let's jump right into your story. Talk to me about your Shark Tank experience. Can you tell me a little bit about the product that you invented, and then kind of how things went for you?
Yeah. So at the time, back in 2009, I was a video producer. I still am doing independent video production. And I was hired by a client to do maybe 2 weeks worth of editing on site in their corporate location. And they put me literally in a supply closet that was about 6 by 6, filled with dry erase markers and reams of paper. And I thought, life has got to get better than this. So I just called up a buddy of mine who lived in New York, and I said, listen, I do video. Let's make a infomercial. This was the time when the ShamWow was out. And,
Okay,
I thought infomercials would be a, ticket to financial freedom.
sure.
So he said, well, hey, I've got an idea for a posture corrector. And I said, well, let's build it. And so, okay. So then we flew to Chicago that next weekend and met up with a bunch of elastic and Velcro, and basically tried to make a prototype for this goofy posture correction device. And next thing you know, we found a manufacturer in China. We started, built a website, and within 9 months, we were selling this thing. And then it started to go crazy, and we sold a bunch of them. And then we thought, well, let's get on Shark Tank, and that'll be the next kind of step in our evolution, if you will. And after a trial and error and some auditions and a bunch of work and some disappointments, we made it onto Shark Tank. And it was a magical experience in that it was a mixture of absolute terror and a rush of adrenaline. And it's a kind of a life-changing deal to be on that show.
Yeah. So, okay, first of all, you say posture corrector and or posture adjust. What was the
Yeah, posture corrector.
okay? And as soon as you say that, I feel like I've got to sit up straighter in my chair, which I guess is the reaction you probably get from everybody.
That's the universal reaction. It's either they move themselves into good posture, or they say, "Oh, I need that."
Right.
It's
That,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, it's kind of like the universal reaction. This is a random fact for you, but it's impossible to lick your own elbow. And just like everyone that you tell it's impossible to lick your own elbow, their immediate reaction is they try and lick their own elbow. Like,
That's hilarious.
so when you say posture correction, it immediately makes you say, I've got it. I need to sit up straighter, and I either need to do it myself or I need your product to do it. I love the concept.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about it, like the you've got to do a lot of homework, I'm assuming, to get on Shark Tank to make sure that you've got you need to have a product, you need to have a
Right.
place to sell it, you need to have the demand, but then you need to have a business plan, you need to have your all your numbers in order. Mr. Perfect is going to start asking you about numbers, and how did all of that preparation go? And did when you got there, did you feel that you had prepared properly, or did you have the feeling like, wow, we were prepared, but we weren't as prepared as we could have been?
Well, we were definitely not prepared. I mean, just between you and me, we were kind of clowns. I mean, we would do all of our strategic meetings at this Mexican restaurant over gigantic beers, and we didn't take the whole process seriously at all, and we still don't. It was just kind of a whim that turned into a thing. But when you go on Shark Tank, they make you fill out an application form that I believe it was like 40 pages long.
Wow.
So they force you to have your numbers in order. And when we did our open audition, we both flew to Dallas. They had an open audition in Dallas, and we thought that it was as good a place as any.
Sure.
So we get down there, and we spent literally a whole day at this hotel in the little business center filling out that form. It took us all day long. Mm-hmm. And then when we went to the open audition, we finally got in after waiting in line and after waiting for hours and hours with literally hundreds of other people. We finally get in. We're standing in front of this producer, and we put down the audition, or I'm sorry, the questionnaire, that 40-page pack.
Right.
And then he looks at me and he's like, "Where's yours?"
Wow.
So we were supposed to have filled out 2 of these. So we did a quick pitch, and then he said, "Here, you got to go fill this out." So we ran outside to the 100-degree, 100% humidity heat, and as quick as we could, tried to fill this thing out, trying to remember what our responses were on the one that we already gave him.
Right.
So we were completely stressed out, and then they wouldn't let us back in to give him the packet. So we were standing outside. Fortunately, there were some windows. And so we were standing outside, literally doing jumping jacks, trying to get his attention. And thankfully that happened, because he said that after that day of talking to people who were auditioning, the only people that he could remember was us outside doing jumping jacks. So that got us the call back.
You know what? It's so crazy. This is a recurring theme on the show, and that is sometimes adversity is truly opportunity. And so
Yep.
here you are, and the way that you look at this is that, you know what, it's not the end. I've got to figure out a way to handle that. So I love it. And so now you get on Shark Tank, and I hear that you do okay, but you've got some difficulty in interactions with another contestant. What happened there, man?
Okay, well, that I am the only person that I know of who has ever been punched in the face by another Shark Tank contestant, and that was the first day that we got there. So we showed up. They fly us in, and by the way, contrary to what you might think, they don't fly you down first class. They flew us on Southwest Airlines, and I was in a center seat with no leg room between 2 kids who were going to Disneyland. It was a nightmare flight. Anyway, we get down to LA, they bring us to the hotel, and one of the other contestants flew in from let's just say New Mexico, and was drunk when he got off the plane. So we end up going out for some cocktails that night at a nearby restaurant, and this dude was there. And we start interacting with him, and he seemed fine, but then he started getting mouthy with the staff and saying some pretty, for lack of a better term, he just said some pretty insulting things to the bartender. And so it was insulting enough that I physically removed him. I got behind him, put him in a little arm lock, and I threw him out of the restaurant. And so problem solved. I come back in, there was an ovation. The people were clapping, thanks, blah, blah, blah. I sit back down. And then about 5 minutes later, out of the corner of my eye, he had run around to the back, gone through the kitchen, come out the kitchen door, and was running toward me and cold cocked me in my temple as I sat at the bar. Oh. And then I got him in a headlock, and I was going to start wailing on him. And I'm not a tough guy. This guy was small, and he was really not a tough guy.
Sure.
And then my business partner, Mike, said, do not do it. Do not do it. And the manager of the restaurant was like, I can have the Culver City police here in 5 minutes. And we both said, no, just let's get him out and let's make sure he stays out.
Okay.
And that was the end of it. Fortunately, I didn't get a black eye. And fortunately, the next morning when I saw the guy, he pretended not to remember that he was blacked out. So we didn't have to have an uncomfortable conversation.
Right.
And the blank unholy irony of the whole thing is the product he was there to pitch was an anti-bullying app.
Oh no. Wow. So yeah, that's a fantastic story. So tell me let me just kind of transition a little bit, because
sure.
The reason you're on Shark Tank is because you've got a product, you're trying to do the entrepreneurial thing. And now you've got your own business. You've got this adventure that you're embarking on with the posture correction.
Yep.
And you take all of those experiences now and you begin to do work for looking at retirement for self-employed people and for entrepreneurs. What is it that says, okay, this is the direction that I need to go now? What made that change for you?
Well, first off, what happened is that, and I definitely do not intend this as a boast, but after you're on Shark Tank, you sell a ton of product. Okay. And you end up making a lot of money quickly. And I blew it all on trips to Europe and dumb stuff, just plowed through it. I did save a little bit, but for the most part, if I would have been more financially responsible, I could have made something out of that money rather than, blowing it on European travel and dumb stuff. And at the same time, as soon as you're on Shark Tank, people start contacting you for help, basically saying, can you help me with my idea? Or can we get on a call? Can you help me, find a manufacturer? And I started talking to all of these entrepreneurs. And one thing that was common to all of them was none of them were prepared for retirement. Nobody teaches entrepreneurs how to plan for their retirement. And so after a few years, I started devouring books, devouring podcasts, and completely redid my investment strategy and started buying some real estate and started doing some other stuff. And as I was doing this, I realized, hey, maybe I should be sharing what I'm learning with other self-employed people so that they don't end up having to work until they're 80 years old. And fast forward to today, now I've got a little podcast where the whole focus is retirement planning for entrepreneurs.
And that's such a good thing. And yet I look at it and I understand that sometimes the most valuable lessons come at the highest price. And for you're learning about retirement planning from the fact that, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but nope. You weren't planning for retirement. And so you had you had something that could have really set you up for the future. And
yep.
It didn't. And so now you say, okay, I've learned from that and I move forward. And so did your idea get bought on Shark Tank?
It did on the show.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a hug with Mark Cuban, and and then they made us do it over again. And reality TV is not reality.
Sure.
And then it's a long story, but I think I don't know what the exact number is, but they say that about 75 or 80% of the deals that you see on the show don't end up coming to fruition.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and I'd be curious to get your take on this. All right, there are tremendous personalities on the show. Okay,
Yes.
so Mark Cuban comes across as being kind of genuine and likable, and Mr. Wonderful comes across as being just kind of crusty and cantankerous, and you know, and then you see the people on the show, and some of the people on the show come across as number crunching people, and some of them come across as being like just totally off the wall. Like, yo, I had this idea, and it woke me up in the middle of the night, and then other people like there's so much personality going on to that in there. How do you think personality impacts your ability to succeed, not just in Shark Tank, but as an entrepreneur itself? Like the rapport that you're able to build with people. What kind of impact does that have?
Well, I think it's huge. I mean, the if you look at Shark Tank, it's a formula. You've got the kind of the villain, like you say, the Mr. Wonderful, and then you've got the nice guy, the Mark Cuban, and it's kind of like central casting. You've got to have this collection of good cop, bad cop. So that's kind of a formula. But in real life, I believe that your likability and your personality, if you're an entrepreneur, is huge and will be the difference between success or mega success. And the way the reason I say this is, for one thing, it's not my idea. This is not an original thought, but if you read Think and Grow Rich with Napoleon Hill's book, okay, which was the granddaddy of them all, of all the kind of achievement books. One of the things that he said that really stood out to me is that you have to have what he called a pleasing personality. And if you're a jerk, if you're not going to be successful. And so when I started my business back in 2006, I had just read Think and Grow Rich, and that was the thing that I really took from that, is that I've got to answer emails hopefully within a couple of hours, definitely within 24 hours. I've got to punctuate. I've got to make sure that nobody can misconstrue what I'm writing as not being what I'm meaning to write. I have to greet people with a friendly personality. I have to do everything I can to be likable, and that's just that component. That doesn't take into account all the things that it takes to be an entrepreneur. But the first thing that I got to make sure to take care of is that I do not ever do anything to make it so that somebody might not want to work with me.
Wow. So it's so interesting. Let me, episode 121, it was the pickle lady, she's a real estate person who made a complete brand out of, instead of giving out cookies and doing that, and she makes pickles and she gives them to everybody. And that's her shtick. That's her calling card, is she's now known as the pickle lady. But,
Brilliant.
But she also said the same thing that you did. She's got her logo and her persona, but that's just the beginning. Okay. And then you've got to do good business after that. But what you're saying is, as a person, you've got to start with being likable and then good business has to follow after that.
Absolutely.
Which makes a whole lot of sense in terms of you've got to make yourself easy to work with. You've got to make yourself,
Yep.
you've got to be someone who people want to work with. And what would you say the percentage is of selling people on yourself and selling people on your product? Is there a difference there, or is it actually one and the same?
Well, for my my main gig, which is professional services, doing video production and video consulting and writing and stuff like that, it's 100% personality, because there are kids coming out of school who know way more about shooting and editing than I do. There are technologists out there who are far more skilled at the craft of video production than I am. I am mediocre at best. And I mean that honestly, because I don't geek out on the technology. I do the absolute minimum required to stay current on technology trends, but people can trust me. Again, it goes back to when people email me, I'm back as soon as humanly possible. If I need to work on a weekend, I work on a weekend. In fact, I generally work pretty much 7 days a week. There is just no question that I am 100% dependable. And then also, going back to the whole likability as a strategic advantage, for instance, I had a client fly me to Germany to do interviews, and I guarantee there's cameramen in Germany. And then he flew me to Japan. I guarantee there are cameramen in Japan, and it would be a lot cheaper to hire local than fly someone halfway across the planet. And so, and he could probably find somebody a lot more skilled than me. So I would say that for if you are in a services business, that likability is at least 80% of your kind of quiver of tools, I guess I would say.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting to hear you say that, because what you're finding is that building a business is actually just building relationships. As you build
100%.
relationships, you build your business. Okay. I want to go back to something that you were talking about. We had talked a little bit about retirement. Okay. Especially as retirement planning, especially as it relates to entrepreneurs and self-employed folks. What do you think are the reasons why people aren't doing that planning? Are there like kind of some universals to say these are the general principles as to why entrepreneurs aren't good at this?
Yes, I've kind of isolated four main reasons. And reason number one is, for most of us entrepreneurs, we don't have that steady paycheck, which makes it so that you can do predictable, regular contributions to your plan. If you have a normal job, you've got a 401k and things just automatically get deducted and you don't have to think about it. It's actually really easy to do retirement planning if you've got a 401k. Hopefully you max it out and invest well. And so that's reason number one. Reason number two is that many entrepreneurs just think that their business is going to be their retirement, meaning that either it'll be on autopilot when they decide to exit, or they'll be able to sell it. And if you look at the statistics, unfortunately, it's simply not true. And for in most cases, if your business makes it more than 8 years, you are in the small minority. So the other thing is that people will say, many that I've talked to, they say, I love what I do. I love my business. So I don't mind working until I'm in my 70s. And for those people, I say, well, how much sweeter would it be to work into your 70s if you didn't have to? If you weren't forced to work until you're in your old age to pay the rent, how much more fulfilling would it be to have the option not to? And then the third reason why I believe that entrepreneurs are so bad is that nobody talks about it. Nobody teaches you. I've read probably 100 books on entrepreneurship and business strategy. I have gone to the seminars. I've downloaded the videos. Not one entrepreneurship book that I've ever read or program that I've seen has ever even talked about creating a retirement plan alongside your business.
Yeah. It makes so much sense, because part of it is the entrepreneurial focus is on like today's business. And you're creating a plan, and so, you've got a 1 month plan, a 6 month plan, a 1 year plan, and even a 5 year plan, which it's all good, but that plan doesn't go beyond that. And in some ways, your retirement is it's about you, and it's so you don't have to work if you don't want to, but it's also about it's about possibly leaving a legacy, leaving something for your kids and grandkids and everything, and
Yep.
that's where the focus has got to take a step, a step beyond just you and where you're comfortable and what you're thinking and what you plan to do. And for me, you know, it's a realization that my health is not a consistent, it's not a constant. And so my plan, I'd love to work until I'm as old as I want to and do it, and there are just variables that we can't count on. And as a result of it,
Right.
like that's part of the reason why we need to make that planning. So,
Absolutely.
so can you give some tips or some ideas for entrepreneurs to say, okay, planning for retirement doesn't have to be a major hassle? Are there some insights that you can provide that would help with the process?
Well, if you haven't started yet, one of the things that I tell people is that, for instance, if you have done your taxes, you can look at what your marginal tax rate is. And let's say it's, if you live in a state like mine where you're paying state income tax, your marginal overall tax rate could be, 40% or more. And if you're not putting money into an IRA that is pre-tax, you're paying that full 43% or whatever it is. And let's pretend that you put $5,000 into an IRA every year or $10,000, you could be essentially saving $4,000 in taxes. So that's a 40% return right there just by paying yourself. And so I tell people, get addicted. And there's the whole argument down the line of the Roth, and I won't get into that. But to get started, get addicted to that tax deduction and pay yourself first so as to save as much taxes as you possibly can this year. And that plays really well to the kind of, we entrepreneurs are, like you say, we're kind of short-sighted. We're thinking about this year. We're thinking about plowing money back into the business. And so if you can kind of every April 15th, just be focused on, hey, I need to put this much money into my IRA so as to save X in taxes, that can be addictive. And that's a great way to get started on your plan and to kind of jumpstart it.
It's very sound advice. I think it's good stuff. Listen, you've been fantastic, man. I appreciate you sharing. If people are looking to get listen to your podcast, to get a hold of you, what's the best way to find you? What's the name of your podcast?
It's called the Rogue Retirement Lounge, ROGUE. And I just call it that because I talk about kind of alternative investment strategies and things that are specific to self-employed people that the gurus, the financial gurus, don't generally talk about. So anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can find Rogue Retirement Lounge.
Beautiful. I'd encourage folks, go ahead. If you are listening to this podcast, it's likely because you are self-employed or an entrepreneur, and it's something that we can all benefit from. I appreciate it. Matt, this has been very interesting. We have come we've come to the point. It's time for 3 questions to establish your humanity. Are you ready for these, my friend?
I am ready to go.
What are 3 things that you think about on most days?
Retirement, sleep, and coffee.
That works. I guess the question is, which order did they show up in? I mean, is it like coffee first thing in the morning, retirement all day, and then sleep at night?
Actually, generally it's sleep, coffee, retirement. I am one of those entrepreneurs who, you talk about guys like the Miracle Morning and the Hal Elrod guys who get up at 4 a.m. I am not that entrepreneur. I'm the guy who wants to stay up late and who wants to sleep until, 8, 9, 10 in the morning. So sleep's huge for me. And I understand that sleep is a big factor in longevity. So that's a big deal. So sleep, coffee, then retirement.
Okay. So when you were younger, did you ever have a celebrity crush?
Oh man, tons of celebrity crushes. Farrah Fawcett was the first one because I'm a child of the 70s.
It's so funny. We all had them. And thank you for being willing to share that. All right, so you're on the West Coast, and
Yep.
I'm just wondering, where do you stand on the willingness to eat meat? Are you a meat eater? Or would you be a carnivore? Would you be an herbivore, a kind of an omnivore, or where do you find your balance in eating?
Well, currently I am an omnivore. In my younger days, I was a vegetarian for 7 years, 1 month, and 8 days. And the older I get, the more I appreciate animals. And so therefore I feel like a hypocrite because I'll love one animal, but I'll eat another. And that causes me a little bit of an ethical dilemma. I don't know if I'm ever going to do anything about it, but that's an excellent question, because there's a lot of vegetarians over here. Um, but yeah, the older I get and the more empathy that I have for my fellow beings, the more it kind of pains me to eat that meat.
What? And I can empathize with where you're coming from. But the problem is, it would be much easier to sympathize with them if they weren't so delicious. I'm so.
Well, you got that right. That's like what my buddy Fat Matt, he said, salad isn't food. Salad is what food eats.
A very, very valid point. Pat Franklin, thank you so much for being on Learning from Smart People. I've enjoyed this. It's been fun. And I feel like we have learned a lot from you. You are indeed smart, and you have showed us your personality. Thank you for doing that. To all my listeners, thank you for being with us today. And I will remind you that when you stop learning, you stop living. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Rob.